Hey everyone, it's Devin, your host of Site Selectors Are People Too. I hope you're having the best day yet. Hope you had a fantastic weekend. Hope you're looking forward to this week. I always say this stuff, but I mean it, right? In today's world where things can just go completely awry at moment's notice, anybody in your life can be going through something. And I truly do hope that you're doing well. I'll tell you who's not doing well right now. That'd be my puppy. Archer went on his first overnight last night, slumber party, if you will. Caitlin, my fiance, went and took care of her mother's dog overnight. Decided that it would be a good idea to maybe expose Archer to something new, right? Staying away from home. Long story short, Archer's exhausted. Caitlin's exhausted. The other dog is exhausted. And as it goes, apparently that was Archer's fault. Archer wasn't exactly the best sleeping buddy, if you will, last night. So he's made his own bed and he's finally sleeping in it. But if we hear him bark or if we hear something along those lines, I'm either just going to keep it in or we're going to go to break and come on back. Anyways, I am not exhausted. I'm not exhausted, and that's because I actually am quite tired, but I'm really excited about today's topic. And normally what we do is on this podcast, the whole point is to humanize our profession, right? Today, instead of humanizing, well, it is kind of humanizing. We're going to take a very lofty topic and we're going to break it down into actionable steps so it's more accessible to the individuals in this profession. I've presented on this a couple of times, and I'll just get straight to it. It's activating real estate for industrial projects. It's about the intersection between real estate development and economic development and the role that an economic developer has and what they should be doing with the real estate in their community. I'm going to make you one promise ahead of time. This is kind of why I've presented on this multiple times. We're not going to go over cap rates and net absorption and market headwinds and all of those critical and relevant metrics within real estate. But what do you do with it as a local economic developer? What do you do with that data? How do you take cap rates and net absorption and market headwinds and use that to put your real estate into a better position to attract industrial projects? There's a disconnect, I think, between how we typically talk about real estate and how you actually need to move forward and do something with the real estate in your community. Real estate, therefore, is, in my mind, one of the most critical yet misunderstood components of economic development. You try to educate yourself, but the typical real estate presentations are full of information that seem way too abstract to use, right? So the goal for today, this is going to feel a little more like a lecture than a podcast, but hopefully this comes with some really good advice or at least get you thinking. But the goal for today is to learn how to use that information in the context of actionable items back at work. And for those of you that are not in the profession, I hope this is interesting and just puts another layer onto everything that economic developers and site selectors have to go through. All of the work that leads up to that announcement that XYZ Corporation is coming to your community and creating all these jobs. It's not as simple as signing on the dotted line with incentives, right? You have to be strategic. You have to have foresight, you have to be proactive, and you have to get down and dirty with things in your community such as your real estate. You, as an economic developer, know your community needs to better position its real estate for targeted industries. Correct? Correct. But how do you do it? So we're going to dive into steps you can take to bring your economic development strategies to life. We're going to start by defining the situation, basically getting your ducks in order. Then we're going to get into the measurement aspect. Then we're going to figure out how to analyze the situation. Then we're going to figure out how to implement based on all of your studies and all of the work you've done. And at the end, we're going to wrap up with how do you control the future of this site. However, you're also going to repeat. So define, measure, analyze, implement, control, repeat. DMAIC. DMAIC is a Lean Six Sigma process. And you've probably heard the term Lean Six Sigma before. It's a very efficient process, and it helps you to bring order to chaos. And let me tell you what, real estate development is nothing but chaos. So, let's dig in. I'm going to start this off with a quote that really hammers home the point. This is attributable to Tesla Motors. And I quote, "We selected the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center as the site for the Gigafactory because it offers several advantages, including access to local utilities, proximity to railroads for easy transportation of materials, and its designation as a shovel-ready site. This allowed us to begin construction quickly and efficiently, accelerating our timeline for bringing the Gigafactory online and increasing our production capacity to meet growing demand for electric vehicles." End quote. This was specific to their project in Nevada. But you can remove a lot of the identifiers, generalize this quote, and this is the lesson to be learned. As an economic developer, you are expected to be a local partner to a prospective company looking to do business in your community, looking to set up new operations in your community. When it comes to real estate, you need to make sure that that prospective company can begin construction quickly and efficiently so that they can accelerate their timeline for bringing their operations online, because they need to be able to increase their production capacity to meet the growing demand for whatever widget they produce. If you don't have your sites lined up and ready to go and activated, how? How can that eventual end user that you are desperate to court because they are the perfect fit for your community, they're a targeted industry, they're going to make a significant economic impact, it's the best fit, it's highly suitable, how is it that you are going to attract them if you have not done some of this work up front so that they can begin construction quickly and efficiently and accelerate their timeline? Every company that comes and looks at your community is on a timeline. They're not building a factory for, I'm just going to say it, shits and giggles. They have an objective. Typically, it's to increase capacity or to roll out a new product line. Or it's to consolidate into one location all of their other, there's a number of different reasons, but they have a reason, and that reason comes with a deadline. They need to produce their widgets by a certain date, either because they have a contract they have to fulfill or because market competition is going to edge them out if they don't. And so timelines are critical. And guess what? A lot of the times they don't have the luxury of time between when they decide to start going out and looking for sites and when they need to start producing. So what can you do as an economic developer to be a good local partner and help shorten that timeline when it comes to real estate? The number one thing to remember when it comes to real estate, if you have no real estate, you have no chance. Land is your only finite resource. I'm going to repeat that. Land is your only finite resource. You can attract new population. You can create new programs. You can get new roads built. You can get new utility capacity developed. Land, however, there's only so much of it in your community. Now, okay, push back and say, well, you could technically fill in a lake, or something actually that I say is you could technically fill in Lake Michigan with enough time and money, right? All right, let's take hypotheticals out of this. In reality, land is your only finite resource. And so what are you doing about it? If you don't have, like I said before, no real estate, no chance. We all know that one perfect site that got away in our communities, right? It had great interstate access, had fantastic visibility. It was just far enough away from population center that industry made sense, but it was close enough that the workforce could get there. But guess what? You didn't do anything about it, and all of a sudden you find out the land has been tied up, and flash forward, 18 and 24 months, and you've got a generic strip mall. You have to be proactive. I'm going to give you another quote here. I love this quote. This one's attributable to Confucius. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Whether you have a comprehensive economic development strategy in place or you're just now starting the process, don't delay. This is something that it's incumbent upon you as an economic development professional to have a solid plan for activating your real estate. In my case, for industrial projects. And here's why. You may think that you're going to have an opportunity to go through this in the RFI process. Right? You get an RFI and, they need 100 acres. I don't have that, but man, I know of this area over here and I haven't done anything with it yet, but I'm going to go ahead and submit it because we can get through some of the issues and maybe they'll consider it and we can work through it, right? I mean, we have a great community, right? We're really close to this major metro, and who wouldn't want to be here? But here's the problem. I, as a company site selection professional, if you don't have, if it's not clear to me through a desktop analysis that 100 acres is even a viable option, you're probably never going to even receive the RFI. Before I ever send out an RFI, before I even draft an RFI letter that goes out to communities, I have to go through and shortlist so that I am not wasting my time and my client's time investigating every potential community within, east of the Mississippi. It's just not efficient. It's not smart. And so we conduct a desktop analysis, which is going to, if you don't have your land activated, and I'm able to see that, it's going to weed you out before you even have an opportunity to compete. And so, pause there for a second. If you have not gone through a land activation strategy and gotten to the point where you're marketing good sites for your targeted industries, I hate to say it, but think about how many projects you've never even had the chance to compete for that otherwise would have been an amazing fit for your community. You're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. The amount of potential opportunities that could have come your way had you gone through and done something about your real estate, it's depressing almost. Real estate is typically, once you figure out the regional constraints and supply chain constraints and you have your region of the country you're focused in on, or your different types of states you're focused in on, real estate is going to be one of your number one slicers and reasons why a community never gets an opportunity to compete. Or gets every opportunity in the world to compete over and over and over again. When all these mega projects were floating around out there, and they're still out there, don't get me wrong, but, during COVID, kind of coming out of COVID, when we were in, mega project hell, if you will, as economic developers, at my former industrial park, we had marketable land for big mega projects. I was responding to a new mega project RFI, if not not just 1, 2, 3, every week. I thought that was just the situation for everybody. But no, I realized after the fact, now that I'm out here, I've been talking to folks on this side of the table. I was one of the fortunate few that had the opportunity to swing at bat as many times as I did. And that's because we had our land under control. We had it marketed. We weren't being eliminated in a desktop analysis. The amount of folks out there that went, no, I mean, I always heard about it, but we never got any, chances at bat. It's because you didn't have your real estate under control. Or maybe it was because you're in a very rural community and they weren't looking at you, what have you. But where I was, and I draw a direct line between decades of work getting this real estate ready for a big mamma jamma end user. I draw that line to the era of mega projects hit, and I was swinging at every single one of them. So will you be considered without activated sites? Yeah, every once in a while. But are you going to get the opportunity to go after the projects that are the best fit for your community every time there's one out in the market? No, you're not. So let's get started here. Actually, you know what? We're going to go to break. We're going to go to break, and when we come back, we're going to dig into the process. I'm going to revise that again. Before we go to break, I just want to start with one thing here to leave us before we go to break. Real estate development, as I've stated before, especially in the world of economic development, it's chaos. It's a long game. It takes a very long time. It requires bringing a lot of stakeholders to the table. It requires having a vision, being bold, being smart. It's the old saying, measure twice, cut once. Not being afraid to make a mistake, because planning is an iterative process. But at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get to that point, as the old adage goes, strong foundations don't crack. You want to ensure that your foundations are strong. And it's a long process. And it can be a very daunting process. But hopefully with the steps that I'm going to outline after the break, define, measure, analyze, implement, control, hopefully at least you're able to find some order within that chaos. And you can start to move yourself forward and your community forward. So, all right, enough of that. When I get back from break, we're going to dive into it. See you in a sec. All right, and we're back. If you've made it this far after I've been on my, oh my God, what's the term? Soapbox. All right, I'm getting off my soapbox. We're getting down into the weeds here. Okay. I'm going to use the terms order and chaos a lot because it really does help to describe what we're going through. This process, this DMAIC-based process, can bring order to chaos. Follow your process one step at a time. Don't be so locked in that you can't be malleable and you can't be flexible, but follow your process one step at a time. So we're going to start with the define phase. And I kind of use a dating analogy throughout this, right? So in the define phase, this is where you're trying to figure out what kind of partner do you want, right? Who is it that you're looking for? Well, how do you figure that out? Okay, well, let's start at the conceptual level. You need to understand the highest and best use of the land. Well, how do you figure that out? How do you figure out what it wants to be when it grows up? This is where you need to be bold. First and foremost, you need to know what you have. You need to, if you haven't already, go through a community economic development strategy. You need to go through a targeted industry strategy. You need to figure out what your site inventory is. And you need to put together a stakeholder engagement roadmap. You can't identify what kind of partner you want unless you know more about yourself. The highest and best use of a 100-acre site in one community is not going to be the highest and best use of a 100-acre site in another community. All other things being equal, it just won't be the same. So you need to go literally, like you have to start from the ground up, right? A targeted industry strategy. If you haven't done one of these before, highly recommend that you do. You need to figure out what types of industries and operations are going to yield the highest and best use for your community, whatever that definition is in your specific community. The highest amount of economic impact. Make sure that it's suitable for your community. Make sure that your community is competitive for that industry. I highly recommend that you engage academic institutions and other organizations focused on smart design during this process, especially the academic institutions. Lean in on those students who are being bold and being smart and allow them to do a charade for you. And a charade basically meaning a hypothetical, well, not even a hypothetical, right? It's them coming in, you telling them the situation or the problem, and then they have so many days to come up with a set of ideas and designs and studies that help you align your community's vision with whatever this site should become. So lean in on your academic institutions. Engage with your utilities. Engage with, you have to be smart at this juncture and not engage too broadly, right? Because say you do land in on that 100-acre site, and that landowner, that farmer, has heard rumblings that you've been working with the state, and there's going to be all this potential money coming down for you to buy the site and to build roads in. And guess what? The price per acre is going to go up when you go in to make an offer because they think that you have that much more money. So you have to be careful, a limited stakeholder engagement at this point, but you need to define the highest and best use of the land. What is the land, by the way? Well, you have to do a site inventory, like I said. You have to take a look at your community, and from a fundamental perspective, where does industry seem to fit? It's not going to be right next to your downtown so that you have an ammonia plant sitting, or you have your schools sitting within the shadow of an ammonia plant, or you've got a heavy, loud foundry operation dead smack in the middle of a residential development. Start taking a look around your community to see the areas where it makes sense for development to go. And a lot of times you can go to your comprehensive land use plan that your plan department has put together. They are another fantastic resource for you during this juncture. And I highly recommend that they be engaged from day one, the planning staff for your community, because this is their job, to plan for the future. They don't think about it the same way that we do as economic developers and site selectors because they're not in this world. And so you're taking, if they have a certain area of the community designated for future industrial use, you're going to them asking why this was chosen, how it was chosen, what the benefits are, what legwork has been done to date. And you're then taking it to the next level, saying, okay, well, I can now bring in the perspective from an economic development point of view, and we can start to figure out how to marry up where it makes sense to the best economic impact possible for this community. So that's the define phase. Engage your academic institutions, your planning departments, other organizations, focus on smart design. The second part of the process is the measurement phase. And back to the dating analogy, this is where you are filling out your dating profile. Because you need to figure out what your targeted industry's requirements are. Say you've determined that your targeted industry is an electric vehicle battery component manufacturer. What are their requirements? Okay, let's fill out our dating profile. How much land do I potentially have? What is the utility capacity that could serve this land, both now and the potential into the future? What is our labor and workforce capacity? What is the overall community's ability to support? Can the community grow to support the targeted industry's requirements? And by the way, any good dating profile also asks the question, what do you want in a partner? What does your community want? One community may say, heck yeah, bring in an ammonia fertilizer plant all day long, right? We're rural enough, and that's going to bring in enough new jobs and new taxation that's going to bring in a lot of good for this community. And we're not going to have this thing, sited right next to schools and restaurants and residential. There's a good spot for it. Another community might say, no, I don't care where you think you're going to put it. We don't want an ammonia fertilizer plant. So what does the community want? Do you have the right ecosystem? The way that you go about, because you've already defined the situation, right? The highest and best use, what you want it to be when it grows up. Now, when you're measuring your community's potential, you need to, first of all, again, start with your targeted industry requirements. What utility requirements do they need for a successful operation? What labor requirements? What sort of partnership requirements and ecosystem requirements? So you now need to figure out, measure your community based on all of those metrics. Do a land inventory review. Conduct an ecosystem review. Conduct an infrastructure review. And this may even seem too far up into the ether to do anything with, but when you sit down, okay, an infrastructure review, it's what I said before. What is our utility capacity? What is the ability for our Department of Transportation to punch in new roads to a potential site? Do we have any sort of restrictions that make this site inaccessible because we can't get any roads in? Infrastructure is pretty cut and dry as long as you can get the answers out of the right folks. Ecosystem is more about trying to figure out the ethos of your community. It's all about, if this new employer came to town, would they fit well in the community, and would they be supported by the community? So let's say it's a generic distribution center. A community that does not have significant and built out road infrastructure, that does not have the labor within the distribution center wage range to support that facility, that does not have the willingness or the interest in yet another distribution center, your ecosystem is not aligned with the distribution center project. Now, a community that has strong academic programs around advanced manufacturing, and you've got a national laboratory focused on, say it's one of those hydrogen fuel hubs. Now, all of a sudden, you're starting to identify assets that create an ecosystem that can go to supporting certain types of industries, and it makes you a stronger potential for them than others. So go through your reviews. That's the measurement side. You've analyzed the overall situation and the needs of your target industries. You've measured your own capabilities both now and into the future. So the next part is, okay, you figured out what you have. You figured out what they need. Now you analyze. How do you, in the dating analogy, how do you land that right partner? You know what you have and what you want. You know what you have and what they need. How do you get from here to there? It's highly doubtful that you have everything already lined up. Otherwise, that industry would probably already be there, right? It is your job as an economic developer to fill in the gaps so that when they come to town, they can begin construction, what did I say? Quickly and efficiently to accelerate their timeline. So how are you going to get from here to there? Now you're analyzing the overall situation. So say there is, you need a couple of new roads. You need a brand new educational program. You need a new pipeline coming out of your K through 12. You are a couple megawatts off on your power. You need to upgrade your wastewater treatment plant. You need to drop new wells into the aquifer to get new water to get to the level that this type of industry would typically require. So you're going to start making a list of the gaps between where you are and where you want to be. And for each item in that list, you're going to be primarily focused on 3 things. Number 1, who are the partners that can make this happen? If it's a new road, especially if it's a state road, that would be a state Department of Transportation matter. But you also need to make sure that your county roads department is involved and a fierce advocate. So the first thing is you need to figure out your partners. Second thing is you need to figure out how long it is going to take to close that gap. Is it going to be a matter of a couple of months because it's just some permitting? Or is it going to be a matter of 18 to 24 months because you need to go through an entire new road project, which 18 to 24 months is actually too short for that. But you get my point. You need to figure out your timeline associated with each item on your list. And the third thing, you need to figure out who the heck is going to pay for it. Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to pay for those new roads? Who's going to pay to get a new academic program in advanced manufacturing established within the local technology or technical college? Who's going to pay for, right? It comes down to the who, the how long, and the how much. You may, after going through this list, realize that there are one or more items that are too costly or going to take way too long, and you may have to go back to the beginning and start over. But now you're armed with more information because you've been through the process. It's an iterative process, right? You're not going to start with electric vehicle battery component manufacturing on the front end, and there's a good chance you're not going to see that one all the way through the process because it's going to hit a critical failure at some point. Or you're going to find strategies to address all issues. And even though right now it seems impossible, there is a path forward where before you didn't think there ever would have been. So analyzing is key. You need to put together strategies at this point, right? So you need to do financial planning. You need to do infrastructure planning, workforce and programmatic planning. You need to analyze your targeted industry attraction approaches. You also need to come up with strategies around land control, land activation, as well as all the other things we mentioned: infrastructure, workforce, ecosystem, marketing. If you don't take control of your most precious asset, somebody else will. And it's very hard to go from a list of items that create a gap between we're here and where we want to go. It's very hard to go from that list to actually solving them if you don't have control of your land. And that takes us to the implement step. So, you know what you want. You know what you have. You know what they need. You know what it's going to take to best position your community to close the gaps between now, here and there, now and then. So how do you implement? This is the dating period, right? You're prepared. You're ready. It's time to act. Always follow the plan that you've put together. You have measured twice. Let's cut once. The first thing you really need to do, and you will have figured out already who's going to pay for this and who the partners are going to be and how long it's going to take, you need to get control of the land. Highly recommend when you're first going in, as long as it makes sense in your situation, consider an option on the land. An option buys you time. An option gives you a certain level of control that unlocks different types of funding. Depending on how you have structured that option, you might also be able to do some site work, some infrastructure work on that property, because you're improving their property, right? So if you walk away, hey, they have a better piece of property with more value. But an option buys you time, because ideally at the end of the day, the economic development organization would not be the entity that is actually closing on the land. You're not actually writing a check for a couple $1 million to buy that piece of land, right? Ideally, what you're going to do is you're going to use that control to line everything up from a funding perspective, from actually maybe doing some work, clearing out some trees, doing some wetlands mitigation. And at the end of the day, you're going to assign that option to an end user. And that end user will be who's at the closing table paying that farmer or whoever else for their land. And therefore, the only monies that you have put up are the dollars required to get that option. So you're going to also, at this point, now that you've got control of your land and you can actually be taken seriously, this isn't just a vision, this is an actual plan with an asset serving as its foundation. You're going to start to work with your partners to build out capacity. You're going to talk to your utilities to put together plans for feasibility studies and facility studies. You're going to potentially issue a developer RFP, right? Maybe your situation calls for you to bring in a developer who is going to serve as the money bags to help get this site ready for the eventual end user. Now, you also have to make sure that you don't lose control of the site by way of involving a developer. That's a topic for a whole different podcast or for a sidebar conversation, but you need to figure out your structures, your legal structures, your financial structures, and you need to actually start implementing. You need to file those articles of incorporation for the new entity. You need to get the registered agent stuff put together to create this new LLC. You need to establish legal and operational agreements. You need to enter into agreements at this point. No longer are you just talking about a vision. You're signing on the dotted line. You're putting wet ink on paper. You are making commitments. You are working through technical developments and infrastructure processes. You're potentially turning dirt. The implement part is where it gets scary for most economic developers. But if you've done your homework and you've measured twice and you're about to cut once, you're prepared. You've got the game plan. It's rooted in strong logic, data, and analyses. When it's time to sign on that dotted line, as long as you've done everything appropriately, not everything's going to be buttoned up, but you're going to have eliminated unreasonable risk. You're at a position where you can get control of the land and start getting commitments from partners. And this is when land development begins. Something else that I haven't mentioned is you need to, maybe during the analyze phase, you need to determine how far the community is going to take this piece of dirt through development. Maybe there's enough state grant programs and there's enough tax revenues locally that you can really take an aggressive approach and take it from, let's call it agricultural land or a brownfield, and you can sink significant dollars into making that site pad ready with curb cuts ready to go. And all you have to do is turn over the keys and that end user just has to go vertical. Maybe you determine that you don't have those resources, or you have enough potential targeted industries that you don't know how the site's going to be laid out. So maybe what you do is you identify where the best locations for ingress, egress are going to be. You pop in some curb cuts, right? Because no matter what industry comes, you know, those are the best ways in and out of the site based on surrounding traffic patterns. Maybe you clear some trees so that it's more marketable and the site is more visible, so that end users can envision themselves there. And maybe you tackle some of the really bad hair on the site. Like maybe there's a massive wetland in the middle, right? And because of your status and in your community, you're able to then negotiate and work with the wetlands land bank and conduct some mitigation ahead of time. Get that area taken care of, go through all the permitting, make sure it's properly relocated somewhere else. And now the site's that much more developable. But you haven't made it pad ready because you don't know where these pads are going to be, right? So maybe you take it kind of halfway through. And maybe that's even too far. Maybe you just say, here's the deal. I'm going to get control of this land. We're going to put together the playbook for an end user. And that's as far as we want to go. You need to determine your risk appetite to get into this, right? Because that is going to dictate what your implementation period will look like. So, you spent time and money getting to the right answer, and you've made some tangible progress. This is where you have to remember this is a long game. And this is where we get into the control aspect of the process. And I'm not even going to try to use a data analogy when it comes to control. I don't see that going well. So it breaks down here. But you need to make sure that politics will probably be what get in the way. And your development of a site is likely going to cross one or more election cycles. How do you control the narrative internally within the community to make sure that election cycles and political whims don't upset all of the work you've done so far? How do you protect against pressures faced by elections and short-term memories? You cannot allow whims to overtake an adherence to the plan. You still need to be flexible. What if supply chains shift? Supply chains shift. But you need to be prepared to be a fierce advocate for staying the course with this site. You also need to control the narrative externally via marketing. Because this is the point where you don't want a site selector like myself to totally pass over your community because we think you don't have anything because you haven't marketed it externally to the greater world. So you're going to control, and this is going to be probably the most painstaking part of the process. But you're going to control. And guess what? You've been through define, measure, analyze, implement, control. Well, then you're going to repeat. I highly recommend that at least once a year, you go back through and repeat the DMAIC process. No matter where you are, you might only be in the measure side or the measure phase. You might be into analyze. You might be implementing. Doesn't matter how far along you are or how new to it you are. Once a year, go back to the beginning. Define the situation. Have things changed that require you to look at what you should be doing with your real estate differently? Then you're going to go through and you're going to measure. You're going to analyze, implement, control. If you take a look at this overall picture and break it down into steps that are part of a process, I promise you it is not as daunting as it feels. You are going to be the champion for the development of this site. You are. So here's the deal. You repeat because market forces are dynamic. Real estate and industry cycles rarely line up. Election cycles cause chaos. So you're periodically going to have to go back to the plan. Does it still make sense? Define the situation as of today. Measure the situation. Is the land still best suited for the initial expectation? Analyze pivot points to mitigate risk, regarding more money and time potentially. Say you get into the process and everybody thought it was going to be a $2 million check that has to be written to tackle one aspect of the project. Well, you get through some engineering and realize, nope, we were off by a multiple of 3. But at the end of the day, don't forget, if you don't take control of your most precious assets, somebody else will. So that's going to end today's process discussion. We're going to go to break. When we come back, I'm going to give a few case studies, and then we're going to call it. I hope this has been helpful, folks. I really do. Trust me, if I can do it, you can do it. Be right back. All right, we're back. And we're going to go through, again, I'm trying to take this down out of the ether and give you tangible, understandable steps, or at least a process that you can follow, or at least help to orient your thinking around this, right? And so I think maybe some case studies will be helpful here. We're going to go through 3 of them. First one I'm going to be able to say is my former industrial park, the River Ridge Commerce Center down by Louisville, Kentucky. The second 2, because of where they are in their process, I'm not going to identify who they are, but we'll get through enough to make the point. So for the first one, and these are all going to start off with quotes. Today is a day of quotes with me. For the River Ridge Commerce Center, and I quote, 20 years ago, everyone thought that the idea of a redeveloped Indiana Army ammunition plant was nothing more than a dream. Today, the property is the region's economic engine by all accounts. So you have to remember that with River Ridge Commerce Center, the timeline was, it's lengthy, right? The Development Authority, the Reuse Authority at the time was established in 1998, still ongoing today as of 2024. The River Ridge Development Authority's role is a one-stop shop. The community looked at the potential and said, this is a little nuts, this is a little crazy, this seems like nothing more than vision, but we're going to give you all the powers in the world, and you're going to run fast, and you're going to run hard, and we're going to see what we can get done with this thing. So they had community backing from the get-go. Go fast, go hard. And so they moved it forward, right? It went from a vision to now there's 60 plus employers. There's a brand new hyperscale data center under development. There's multiple emerging industry clusters forming. Heck, they have a cheesecake factory bakery coming to town. A cheesecake factory bakery, right? This is what it looks like when a community empowers its economic developers to run fast and run hard. And they were able to take a look at what they had and turn it into something worthy of the community. Now, I will say, and just like I will with the other properties that we're going to talk about here, one negative was that they probably didn't go through, and actually I was there, I know that we didn't go through the repeat part of the process enough. For the longest time, it was assumed that the mega site was going to turn into an automotive OEM. A lot of dollars spent on designs, on renderings. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into marketing and turning away other potential industries because that's what they thought it was going to be. Well, guess what? If they would have gone through and done a targeted industry analysis and looked at the requirements, they would have learned that automotive OEMs cannot be within each other's shadows. And right across the river in Louisville, Kentucky are 2 Ford plants. A site was never going to turn into another automotive OEM. So a lesson to be learned there. Sometimes you can run a little too fast and a little too hard, which is why it's always critical that you go back and repeat the DMAIC process. The second case study, and again, we'll start off with a quote. And by the way, this is in a southern community. And that's all I'm going to say. The quote is, and I quote, "The arrival of a major destination employer in the region puts all eyes on surrounding communities. Will they be able to step up and take advantage of the opportunity or fail like so many others have?" So in this situation with this mega site, They had an existing opportunity. Unlike River Ridge, they were trying to create the future and create opportunities. These communities and this community with this mega site has an existing opportunity. There's a major new employer in the region driving the need for more property for its supply chain. The problem for this community is that they lack prior preparation. But the good news is, back to Confucius, community leadership acknowledges they're behind, and so even though they didn't start 20 years ago, they can start today. And so this community is going through the lessons of how to pivot quickly. Thankfully, they have strong leadership, which means huge potential. They're in the middle of their process. They're probably at the measurement phase, going into the analysis phase at this point. And as long as they can move forward faster than the amount of time that River Ridge had, they're going to be able to take advantage of the opportunity in their backyard. The final case study, it's another Midwest community. And here's the quote. Hidden in the corner of our region, this potential megasite is primed to become the next economic hub for a tri-state region. But is the lack of progress to date a deal killer? Do we even want it? Yeah. So this is a situation where it's creating opportunity again. It's the proactive versus the reactive. In this case, unlike with River Ridge that was in a very solid market, they also have to create a market. They have a solid base in this community of manufacturing, but they don't have a specific ecosystem to work from. All of that being said, it truly is the perfect site. It's 1,000+ acres with rail, utilities, highway access. For all intents and purposes, the labor is there as well with a strong manufacturing base locally. But what this site could turn into, the specific ecosystem is not quite there yet. So these case studies were not necessarily about how you apply DMAIC, right? They're more about your community could fall into one of these buckets, either where you have an asset in a vision and you need the authority to run fast and run hard, and you have all the time in the world to get it done, and with the slow burn, all of a sudden you can build critical mass like River Ridge, and you end up with something like a hyperscale enterprise data center and a brand new railroad. You might be in a situation where all of a sudden you find yourself behind the 8 ball because there's a massive opportunity just down the road, and you all of a sudden realize, we don't have real estate activated to take advantage of this. So how do you move that forward? Or you could find yourself in the visionary phase, where you look at a piece of property and you go, you know what? That's an ideal mega site, or that's an ideal 100-acre site. We can do something with that. We can transform our community. And then you have to figure out how to get it done. But no matter which situation you're in, you can apply the DMAIC-based process. And hopefully that helps to bring some order to chaos for you. This is what I do for a living, right? I'm on the other side of the table. I'm one of the site selectors, right? But I will tell you what, on behalf of my fellow site selectors, my gosh, how thankful we would be if more communities were able to go through a process like this and get their sites lined up and ready to go for us. Because we want you to succeed and we want our clients to have more options to take a look at. Please, as always, if you have any questions or if you want to chat about your situation, or if something didn't make sense, please reach out to me. This is an area that I can speak ad nauseum on. And my advice is going to be unique depending on your community's situation. But it's always going to follow that DMAIC-based process. So, all right, folks, this has been Site Selectors Are Professors Too. I appreciate you indulging me this time and allowing me to kind of, again, get on my soapbox and then get into lecture mode. I really hope that you've found this helpful and that you're inspired to do something with your real estate. Because if you don't, somebody else will. And you have to remember, as an economic developer, you are the person, the entity in your community charged with ensuring that your community grows in the right direction. And real estate is the foundation of that. So, that's all for today. My dog has slept through this entire thing. Oh, he is contorted laying on his dog bed. I might have to upload a picture of this. This is hilarious. He takes after me. I don't sleep flat. I am all over the place. But anyways, now I'm rambling. Folks, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Call a loved one. Call a friend. Check in with yourself. Because the work will always be there tomorrow. And when you get to work tomorrow, you're going to open up your notebook and you're going to start off a new section that says activating real estate for industrial projects. Begin. Once again, Devin Hillsdon-Smith, your host of Site Selectors Are People Too. Talk to you again soon. Cheers. Just a heads up, views expressed in this podcast are solely my own and are not attributable to any employers, whether past or present. Thank you.